In this video I'm going to go through the worksheet that I use as an introduction to isometric projection and use an isometric grid paper. Isometric drawing is another way of presenting drawings in 3 dimensions, and you can see here 30 degrees is the angle that's used to project either side. It starts off by drawing a vertical line, and we project a line in 30 degrees in both directions, sometimes referred to as the crow's foot. An additional 2 lines are drawn parallel above that, and then I have all vertical lines as shown there. And the final step is to complete the back of the cube here. So we're going to use this here for the next 4 exercises that we have here. The top one, you can see it's dotted, and we can start it from the way that it shows in the directions above by drawing the lines as they're built up here. You can see I started one of the lines wrong, but it doesn't really matter. It's really only join the dots at this stage. So it gets us to position our hand correctly, and we can anchor the heel of our hand and use the pen lines to draw. So starting with the vertical line, we have dotted lines to start off, what I call the crow's foot at the bottom. Now we need additional lines here to complete, so we want to go 30 degrees above that. You can see I'm using a pencil here to draw 2 light lines, then 2 vertical lines, and you can see I'm using my middle one as a reference. And again, I use the lines that I've already drawn as reference for drawing these angled lines. If you so wish, you could turn the sheet around and it could be used as well to draw parallel lines, which sometimes is quite helpful. I'm just going over the outline of it in pen here to make it stand out. And the next thing we see here is an isometric grid lines which are drawn here. So I'm just going to measure up 3 squares on it and draw a vertical line. As we'd start, go 30 degrees for 3 squares. Then I'm going to do exactly the same thing from the top of that vertical line that I've drawn and join each of these up with 2 vertical lines and complete the back of the cube with parallel lines. Now we have no reference points here on a blank piece, so I'm just going to draw a vertical line and pick 2 points of what I think would be roughly the size of the cube. And again, I'm only using it as reference to draw 2 lines at an angle of 30 degrees either side. Again, I'm using my line as reference and going parallel to that. And I need 2 vertical lines now, which should be in line with each other. And again, my 2 reference points and drawing parallel. As you can see, the cube has worked out a little bit smaller, but this time I have no way of measuring my sizes unless I was to take a ruler to that. And we have the square completed. Over here now we have a table. It's just from the very bottom point we can see that the sizes are written beside each of these. The legs are 1 square. I'm coming over a distance of about 7 squares to start my vertical line, which I'm coming up to the height of the side of the table, which is 4 squares in height. And I want to draw the top of the table now, which is 7, and then it's by 4 in the opposite direction then. So I use the lines as my guide, coming 4 squares back at 30 degrees in the opposite direction, and then join up my 7 squares at the back. I'm using pen to do this as the isometric grid paper here is a little bit heavy. I'm drawing the back lines down 4 in 1, and I complete that up to within 1 square of the top of the table. So I've done the side, now I'm going to the front, and again the same thing, just keeping 1 square of distance right around to draw the legs. And behind that we can see that there's the depth of the legs, which is 1 square as well. And just to highlight this here, I'm going to use a little bit of colour to make it stand out a little bit more on the isometric grid paper. And there we have rough proportional shape of the square, or of the table as we see it here. This last section, it's really just a bit of practice of whatever you've done. You can take a letter of your name or your entire name. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do the full MTW, and if you wish to slow it down to see it being built up, you can. But basically you start with the most information that you have, which is the front of the letter, and you draw it in an angle of 30 degrees. This takes quite a considerable bit of practice, and maybe it's best to just start with a simple letter to start off with. And if you did wish to do so, the T is probably the one to start with, and measure out a few cubes and draw these in an isometric grid. And that's the worksheet that we use for MTW.